1 second. Tianan, I see an update in your image.
Yeah, decided to have a little fun, just a little fun.
Nice.
Hey, folks.
Oh, we didn't get Amy showing up today. Does that mean there's something on the agenda that I don't know about?
No, not at all. It was mostly because I realized I'm usually double booked for this one, so this time I told the other meeting that I wasn't going to make it, or I don't know. We'll figure it out. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know.
Thanks for joining.
She's here to comment on your proposals, Brandon.
I'm not. I'm quite curious about where we've landed on things, so I'm really just here to listen, I promise. And I will now listen.
I'm curious about Josh's very trimmed haircut there.
That's the first thing I noticed.
It's an illusion. This is
Grew up. What happened?
It's many hours of a hat on my head. The same here.
I wish that worked for me.
Different stages, similar. Very different than the hot dog hat, or I don't even call it a hat.
When I first jumped on, Vincent gave me the 1 minute, turned his video off and ran away or something like that. So not sure if he's still doing something or not. I'm going to take the silence as him still doing something.
Do we want to flip the items because he may have something to say about tags?
You might want to know about the proposal E too. I'm pretty open to whatever people want to talk about. I just figure out there are a few things on there because we've had stuff happening. Get my stuff moved around, and then I'll kick this thing off. It's obligatory that I have to keep the chat window up while we're on these things, because otherwise people say things and you can't see it. So yeah, we're 5 after. Go ahead and kick it off. Immutable tags popped up this week and it seemed like an interesting discussion. So I figured I would just make sure it was visible here in case people had more thoughts on how to discuss that. Kind of gets into the question of how do we want to communicate this from the person pushing the image and the person pulling the image, with or without registry support, and all the different various scenarios in there. And I can kind of get where Akihiro is coming from, but he's just looking for something he can put into that, get some, and then he can make client tooling. It does some kind of checking on top of that, or what was he calling it? Dockerfile.sum, I think, something like that. So he was looking at it from the client side where his client could do some enforcing, but I think all of us are looking at it from the registry side of if a registry doesn't support that, then what happens with the client? Jason has some good thoughts in there. Other people have some good thoughts in there. Figured out to open it up for thoughts in here. Drop that
I
up
just
over.
I just got done reading all of the comments here. I'm wondering with the extensions idea, is that enough to enforce? Is that enough to say immutable tags are truly supported? Whereas with Jason's idea, it seems to be put a character that's not allowed. And that would be like truly an indicator. Or maybe nothing's a true indicator.
Yeah, because then Akihiro came back and said, well, who knows if a registry is really filtering that out today? It could just allow it. We just don't know because no clients are doing it. And there is a downside to if you make this switch in here in the tag and put an invalid character in there, that sure, maybe a registry can support it right away, but you're going to find some clients out there that don't support it. And so now your images aren't pullable. And so that's a whole different set of challenges. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, my general comment is there's 2 parts. One, some registries already support this, like we support immutable tags in ACR today, and there's various places you want to do those. And I think the idea of a mutable tag is the tag itself shouldn't change, right? Like if I want it to mutable, it might be v2.2 to start, and it is immutable. And later I might want to unlock it so I can update it. If there's a special character in it, I don't really know how you do that. So I haven't read the whole thread here. And it's just and the other is just a general comment as I worry about all the stuff we're trying to jam into tags as opposed to actually improve the specs to say, here's what a registry supports. There's I forgot what we called it, basically an API that says, here's what version the registry is and what capabilities, a capabilities API, that's what it was. So yes, I love immutable tags. We support it, we implement it. I know some others do. I'm just not sure if this is the best way to do it.
And I see Brian's comment that if it was really immutable, you would use a digest. Yes and no. I can see some value for having a tag that can't be changed, but I also get that if you want something that's truly immutable, the digest are the way to do that today.
Yeah, I think the balance there is 2 things. One, it's kind of what I was just saying before, in a sense that locking is truly immutable is, yes, it's a digest, but it's not human readable. There's something to be said about I can look at something and mentally remember it when I see it in a Kubernetes listing or otherwise. But it's also the ability, if it's a tag that you can unlock it and fix it. Like truly, I don't, if you truly want to make it always immutable, you could just leave it locked. And maybe there's a part of this immutability API is there's the tag history API. There was an interesting conversation that Docker actually implements that. So when they do their deletes.
Yeah, and that kind of jumps into my comment of what happens if you delete it? Does the delete fail? And so now you have content that you can't get rid of. Does the delete succeed? Now it can be replaced with something new, or do you now have to keep track with the tag history like you're saying to know that this was previously deleted? tag, and the only thing it can get put back with is this specific value.
Are you saying that immutability means locking as well? There's actually two. There's like delete lock and update lock was the way we think about it in ACR.
Yeah, and I don't think that was defined in this spec of which we were looking at until I asked the question. I think he came back and he might have updated it. The other direction I was taking, we were mentioning maybe some of the extension fields. I was also wondering if it makes sense to maybe extend the tag listing API itself. And so you're not looking at the tag name, but something in the tag listing API could tell you, hey, this registry supports immutability, and this tag here that I just returned to you itself is immutable. And so instead of just returning the tag list, you're returning an array of descriptors, and maybe something in that descriptor says this is immutable, something along those lines. That's just all kinds of excitement there. I'm giving it the awkward silence to see if anybody had interesting thoughts on that. In general, I think we've got a lot of back and forth on this one, but I figured I'll at least bring it up. Let people know the conversation was at least happening. Anything else before we jump on to another topic? Any thoughts, forward progress? I don't really have any action items. I just wanted to make sure people are aware. Okay. So the other one, proposal E. I'll throw this one over in the chat too. Which is, we're kind of getting to the point of the working group that I feel like we're consolidating around one of our proposals. We had A, B, C, and D, and each one of them had different values that we were bringing to the table. And then proposal E said, let me cherry pick a bunch of ideas from a bunch of them and put them all together into one big proposal. And so the result there, I'm actually going to open this up as a new file, which is probably what Josh linked to over there as well. Yeah, so this kind of goes through, and there are some things that I haven't gone through and updated. We were chatting, and this is, right now, it's very rough around the edges. It's just a proposal. It's not like a formal spec or anything just yet. But it does add a new media type. And so we'll have a media type that's for just artifacts that contains just blobs. It does define the reference type field that I wanted to put on that media type and on the existing image manifest. So we'll be extending that manifest. It defines a couple of annotations for filtering things, and it defines an API that we want to add to the distribution spec for how we can extend this stuff. And so with that, the goal of having all these things working together is that we actually have a forward progress, some kind of way we can start now with what we have out there with registries today, but also have that forward value as we start getting registries to upgrade and clients to upgrade. We can make use of that new value. So registries today, without the API, they can just push some digest tags up there, similar to what you see out of Cosign, how they were doing it. They have the little digest. I'm adding into that a hash field in there so that you can push multiple of these concurrently. And so they're not, you don't have to worry about maintaining an index. They can all go together. And then once that is out there, you're pushing image specs. So that should just be accepted by a registry. A tag should just be accepted by a registry. So we can do this today. The only thing that's holding us back is just us agreeing that that's what we want to do. And then once registries start to upgrade, then you can start using the new API. But since you've made an image that is being passed around for the actual data, that same image that is pushed to a registry, it has the new API that you can query, can also be pushed to a registry. It doesn't have the API and just use the tag. And so you have that portability from registry to registry. The object is identical. It doesn't change. The digest stays the same. And so you get that portability in there. And then once all registries do update, then you can say, great, we're to this new good point. We've got an API out there we can query. We've also got this new media type, and let's start using the new media type for things because they might want some value out of that. You don't have to push a separate image config. In addition to your image layers, there's some value coming out of that. So that's kind of what this does. Just wanted to give you an idea. This was coming. A lot of stuff to read. I don't know if people want to see me go through the whole presentation a second time because I was already doing it on the working group earlier this week. My main goal here was just to say, this is coming. We're going to probably formalize it, tweak up a couple things that are missing in here. And I just wanted to open it up for Q&A from general OCI side of, are there things you want to see coming out of this? Do you want to make sure that we don't miss a particular detail? All of those lines, or do you have questions and want us to go back and revisit our whole thought process? And if everybody's silent, I'll just keep talking about what the spec says, but chime in, please.
I think that I'm glad that you put together something, like I said in the other meeting, that sort of spans the registries with no support to the end of the spectrum and with the upgrade path. So I'm hopeful that this, with some feedback, will get us to the finish line of the working group.
Of course, I can't scroll this bit without seeing that I still need to take this out. So ignore that, even though I just highlighted it. Look away from there. Taking an existing image manifest, we add in this reference object in here. It's got a couple annotations that it might add, and you suddenly have this artifact that we're going to be able to push up to a registry today. And so theoretically, reference should be ignored by a registry that doesn't know what it's doing. And we've tried to be very clear. I think we'll probably hit a couple registries that we'll need to work with that are doing some filtering on that. But hopefully, if we get this in there, we can get that worked with those registries. Let's see. Other than that, the new media type looks very similar. Artifact manifest instead of image manifest. It's going to have a list of blobs. It's going to have the reference field, annotations, but no config. And the blobs are not necessarily ordered. They're optional as well. So this lets you get a lot more lean in the artifact side. For the API, I just swapped out pulling a manifest with pulling a reference. And then you query with your digest. And then you get back image index or index. So an array of manifests, and these are just all of the different things that refer to that reference that you gave it. And so you say, I've got this image out there, tell me everything it points to it, and it comes back and says, here are the 3 different artifacts that point to that image. Presents it to you in an index, and we'll pull up the annotation. So whatever annotations they put on that artifact, we'll pull it up to this level so you can do any other filtering or querying there, but we're also going to introduce a filtering API as well. So you can do server-side or potentially client-side filtering, whatever makes the most sense. Still a little bit of discussion on how we want to set up this API. I'm thinking more than just like an equal value. We'll probably have like some greater than, less than. We'll have some sorting, both ascending and descending sorts. So I need to work that out a little bit more. It can't just be a simple equal right there. But yeah, that's kind of the things we're thinking of in terms of, we want to query, give me the newest scan result that has, the most recent date field. So we need to sort it descending by date, but have only the scan results coming back. So you want to do the filter and the sort at the same time. A lot of different use cases like that. And then for anybody that hadn't seen the digest tags, they have the algorithm. So SHA-256, the reference that you're pointing to. And so this would be like your image digest, a short hash of the artifact that that this tag points to. And so this is going to be, say, your signature. This will be a short hash of that signature digest. And then what it is. So in this case, I had SBOM, could be signature, have a couple of short things here that people would be like some well-known extensions people could query on. And this is kind of our intermediate state. This is what will work today with a registry. And then the goal is to get registries upgraded so we can get off of this. The idea behind having that hash there is that deduplicates. You can push a whole bunch of these references all to a same image out there, and they don't collide with each other. So you have the ability to do multiple of these pushes, lots of signatures, lots of scan results without having to worry about ordering or any other collision issues like that. No race conditions is what I'm thinking of. And that is pretty much it. That's what we're thinking of. Got a quiet group out there today. Any thoughts on things that we should be including when we bring this up to the greater OCI? I'm assuming we're going to have like a pull request to image spec, a pull request to distribution spec. And if we're introducing a new media type, should that be is that going to go into image spec repository, or should that go into a different repository all its own, or into artifact spec, and we just make a new section over there, redefine what artifacts look like?
An
My
artifact
idea,
spec maintainer, I would just suggest, the goal was always to get this to the distribution spec. So I don't want to make it yet another, like if I would suggest distribution spec would be the best place for it, and merge what we have in artifact spec into distribution, but just from an artifact spec maintainer or artifacts repo, whatever we call it.
this is just my thoughts. My idea with the template is the breakdown in the changes section. There should be a registry section and a schema section, and my thoughts were schema would go image spec, and registry distribution spec. It's not explicitly called out here, but I think that makes sense, and there's a lot of types defined in image spec. I don't know, Steve, are you saying that's not what
Yeah,
you're saying?
this goes back to the refactoring conversation we've been having for a long time. There's the image spec, the container runtime spec folks should have a place that they could innovate in the places that they need to do uniquely to them, to put the burden on them that they have to carry. The generalization for all artifacts is, I think it's just untenable. So the idea is that the artifact spec has the generalization that can support any artifact type. And the image spec can say, just like the Helm team, right? The Helm team takes basically the OCI artifact proposals, the model of that OCI artifact is, and defines how they use it, and all the other artifact types that use it as well. So the idea is, let's kind of continue down that path. Distribution says, I know how to accept and return these things. And any artifact can say, great, there's a spec for how I interact with registries. Here's how I use it from my type. And then the image spec can just either continue to use the image manifest that they use today, or they can evolve to another one. But then they can say that, hey, blobs are actually ordinal. Here's the specific annotations that make sense to the image spec. Here's a config object that's unique to the image spec.
I guess I'm not clear. Where should the new schema land?
That's what I'm saying. The new schema would be in distribution, because it's all about how a distribution can admit and push, discover, pull content. And then just like the Helm, basically the image spec becomes similar to the Helm spec. This is how this particular artifact type uses it and what it does uniquely to it. And you don't have to worry, the image spec maintainers can worry about the container runtime image format, and they run with that.
So if we extend image spec with a new reference there, do we still need to put this one bit as a pull request over to image spec?
Yeah, if you're evolving the image spec, I think you put that in the image spec. I mean, that would be my suggestion. I think the idea of refactoring, some of this stuff has so much friction that it's not worth it in some places. If don't break what exists, I think there's a huge versioning question related to adding schema to this manifest. But I think if you're going to build a new manifest, it's the place that you actually fix it. You fix the refactoring thing. Because the consumers of it don't really care where they pull it from.
So talking about versioning, we've got a schema version here. We've got a V1 over here. We are adding a field without changing any other existing fields. Do we need to do any version changes, or are we allowed to just push it as is?
deferring the version conversation because I think that that is a
I-
fur ball in itself. It doesn't
I-
matter what we're changing in it. I think that there is a discipline of what we want to think about with versioning. Like the schema version was a whole nother thing. We've kind of had that conversation quite a bit, and I can't remember if schema version is required. I know we added media type recently. I can't remember a schema version. To me, schema version would bump because it is a new version of the schema, but there was people that were more in depth to that had stronger opinions than I.
I feel like that's going to be a breaking change to a lot of runtimes.
I define breaking. You're adding new
If I have a
capabilities.
runtime and I see a schema version that's not 2 right now, I don't know what to do with that object. I'm not going to be able to work with it. And the whole goal of putting a field in there that was just an unknown field was that I wouldn't have to modify any existing runtimes to make this work.
I recognize the stress point. This is the crux of versioning.
Yep. That's why I figure we got 30 minutes. Might as well open a can of worms now and see if there's a direction we need to worry about. Mike, I
Oh,
see
I'm
you come
here.
off mute.
Did I hear a can of worms?
Yeah.
Are you the big fish that wants to eat a worm?
No, I'm a little full right now. I got my hook in my my lip right now.
I
So
like how
Mike, do you have
Vincent
thoughts?
dodged out of that one.
Sorry. Schema version 2.
Yeah, we've
Yep, we
said
need it.
schema version 2 everywhere, except for like the old original Docker schema v1 stuff that
Yeah.
really isn't supported anywhere. If we add a new field, we're not changing any existing fields. Are we required to change any of these versions?
It depends if you want the way distribution is written is based on the value of schema version equals 2 and then a set of schema types for that version, right? So if you wanted to, create some new schema type to be able to process additional fields, then we could do that, but it would be a new schema type. Now, if you need a new version, that would be presupposing some different set of schema types. We could probably get Steve on here if he's not here, to talk about that.
I do not see him here, and we're also losing Vincent, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was just the way, Docker distribution was coded originally, right?
Yeah,
is why that schema version 2 was locked down for any new types. And when I say new types, I mean like OCI was a new type, right? If you
right.
wanted a second version of OCI, then yeah, we'd probably have to go to schema version 3.
My big goal of being able to say extending the image manifest with this one new field
Got it.
was that per the extensibility requirement, they said that should just be okay. And then once we get to, okay, we want to redefine what these fields look like,
right?
Then we need a new media type. And we need to make sure registries support that.
Right.
And so that's why we're going to have a lot of time until that happens.
Yeah, in theory, as long any new additional fields will just get stored, right? They won't be processed as new types. If you needed additional functionality based on the type, then we have to move the media type version up and create a new schema, right? Resolver in distribution to handle that.
So the new functionality is only going to be on registries that support the new API. And so the idea here is if you query the registry, the API comes back 404, I don't know what you're telling me, then that's okay. But if the registry does have the API, then it should use this to populate the contents of whatever the response to that API is.
And we say that, are you going to change the media type version too? Or is it just?
I'm hoping to keep it the same.
What's that?
I'm hoping to keep it the same just because I know how many places this is hard coded and I don't want to break.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I mean,
yeah.
I don't really see problem with that. I mean, you could always just add more code for B1 if you see the new field, then switch on that behavior, right?
Yeah.
And then the old code that doesn't know that's there, it wouldn't work. But you'd have to modify the old code, and that therein lies the problem, right? If you're expecting a different behavior.
Well, the idea is that the old code with the current behavior is right. And so it shouldn't change any behavior of the old code. The only place this reference gets used is if you have the new API and that API says, let me find everything that has that field defined. And if the field isn't defined, then great. We
Yeah,
ignore it.
you wouldn't get the API on the request. So, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. And so if the API is there and exists, and you've uploaded a field and you've uploaded an object that has this field defined inside of it, then it would
Right.
match, but it's perfectly fine to upload something without the field.
Got it. That makes sense, especially after we add the new API for getting a list of the extensions and such, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just me, or does somebody and anybody else see schema version? We're changing the schema.
The big
Our
thing for me, I think the
desires
schema version,
outweighing the logical.
well, the
It's
schema
not
version, one of the
changing so much as extending, right?
part of the schema version was that you're going to have a media type, right? And so if you don't have a media type, then you're no longer schema version 2. But as long as you have this media type in your schema version 2, then it goes down one parsing path.
You got it. Bingo.
I guess I'm not suggesting it's schema version 12. I'm wondering, is it 2.01? Is it like, there is a difference in the schema. And I get the media type, and that's been always my struggle, is the media type and the schema version. So we've already implemented it, so I'm not overly worried about it per se. I worry about
Cool.
what are we setting as expectations for the community for how we ship specs.
To me, it just solidifies the extensibility requirement of what we expect from that extensibility requirement, which is, hey, we didn't change anything you already knew. We only added an additional field. And if you completely ignore that additional field and don't know what to do with it, you'll still behave correctly.
What is the expectation if I send that up, that the registry is not going to garbage collect it, or it's, what is the?
No,
I
in this
guess you're-
case, if you push this up to a registry right now and the registry doesn't know what to do with it, that's fine.
Well, but what you're saying is it actually gets tagged in that case. If a registry doesn't
Yes.
support it, it gets tagged, which is kind of different problem, but it at least satisfies the typical scenario where untagged manifest have they're not written in the spec, I realize, but it's a pattern that we want to make sure it doesn't get broken. So your idea is that it doesn't know not to delete it because it's got a reference to something that has its own life cycle, but it has an independent life cycle because it has a tag.
Yeah, the whole point of the tag, the digest tags that we're doing, is it is filling in what a registry will do with that registry API. If the registry knew how to parse this field, and we're assuming the registry doesn't know how to parse that field for you. And so you push a tag that gives you garbage collection and it gives you discovery.
In hacky ways, that was difficult, but at least it's kind of like the cassette stuffed in an old car to get your USB port.
It's hacky, but it's the best hack we've got.
I want the new car.
You can
The
have
USB port and everything built in. No wires hanging out of the dash.
You can have it. I had that little cassette thing plugged in mine for a long while.
Sounds like you got something that'll work, even if I had an old private Docker registry running in my cloud, right? It sounds like that's your target.
That's the goal. You query the registry, you see the API doesn't exist. You go, okay, great. I'll just push my digest tag up. The person doing the query says, hey, I just pulled out image 00000.
Yep.
Tell me everything has got one of these tags that has that prefix to it.
Yep.
And then I'll just go pull those back and do what I need to do on the client side.
Sounds like a working plan. Simple matter of testing, right?
Testing and then find an 8-track cassette deck for Phil.
Fun.
I don't know if we still have those, but I saw that you could buy a pack of, I think, 10 3.5-inch diskettes for $20 the other day.
Nice.
Hey, Phil.
Heather.
Oh man, you got an 8-track and an antique truck. Cool.
No, I just made
Oh
that
no,
up.
wait. Nope, you don't have. Never mind.
Has to be an antique truck because the only way you can fit an 8-track is to have a monster sized truck. Wouldn't fit in some Toyota or something pickup. Pick up a whole seat.
Hey, I lived through 8-tracks. It's not worth going back. Trust me.
They were great for studios because it just looped back.
I guess that's your point. It's not worth going back. Yep.
I'm Kerr, I saw you came off mute. Did you have a thought? If you do, we can't hear it. Feel free to jump in anytime. All right, so my go-to, other than clean this up, because we still have stuff to finish up here, is to get some pull requests at some point. Once we finish up, we're not done with this in the working group, but we're getting close. Before we bring it to OCI is just to come up with some pull requests, mostly on distribution spec. And then we'll also add in a couple small ones for this one field on image spec. Sorry, highlight the right thing. And then find some good record players.
USB ports hanging off of,
There you go.
bridged from the old to new.
Yes, Ajay, that is a good question, which is, are we comfortable adding the new API? And I just kind of threw it out there just to be like OCI everywhere else. Just adding a new API here, or do we want to use the extensions proposal and say this needs to be under v2 name underscore OCI underscore refers / references, something like that?
That's another angle of the versioning thing, because basically if you're sticking it there, you're effectively saying there is a new version of the registry spec, as opposed to what was nice with the extensions API is you can opt into specific extensions, kind of like phone capabilities. Not all phones have the same capabilities, but there is a common way to define them. So this was, if you put it there, I think this also raises the question, is it a version of distribution? Which is also fine, a version. It's just, I think there's a little more well-defined flexibility with the way the way the extension spec came out of distribution. Either way.
So considering the different options there, one of the thoughts on this one, just having it in the normal path there, was it kept things looking similar to what we already have with pulling up manifests and stuff like that. But you can always define all the HTTP status codes to know, does this exist? And so the default 404 comes back, you just know, okay, this isn't there, it doesn't work. Or we can have status codes that come back and say, here are your results, no results, whatever makes the most sense for it. So you might be able to turn things on and off and still say, look, you can have the newer registry, it has all this stuff, but still not support it just by giving back a different return code.
You're assuming the new registry, an old registry provided that update to say they don't, they have that API, they don't support it? Because I thought that's kind of the ability of the extension API. You can still call an extension API, and if it doesn't exist, you still get the 404.
Either way, you get.
Yeah, you're going to get the 404 both ways. And so the point I was throwing out there was the value of the extensions API is that you could selectively turn things off. And I'm saying you could selectively turn this off too and just say, look, I'm not going to support my registry. I'm just going to give you a 404.
But so do you think if you add that to the root like you've done, does the distribution spec get versioned? And if so, does a registry declare what version it supports? And if there's another API that got added, but I made this optional, for some reason, I don't want to support that. I don't know why. But
We didn't put on it, but yeah, I believe that would be a new version. for the new API.
So if you
Either
have-
way, with the extension or with the, you know, a new references API.
I would call it distribution spec 2. Whatever we got 1.2
It might
or
be a
something
point
along those
release
lines.
here. Yeah.
I would bump the minor version on distribution spec, but the idea of putting it under the path was that it's something that shouldn't resolve today, because if you try to hit this path today, there's no way
Right.
to come up with a structure. You're always looking for like a tags list or manifest something. If you don't have that in that run field,
Right.
it just doesn't know how to work with it.
Yep. Which we could probably specify today without doing a version bump. It would be when you specify what the API does, that you would need a minor, at least a minor version bump.
Yeah, my thought of the minor version bump in distribution was just, hey, if you want to say you're compliant with the latest version of distribution spec, you might not have this. So you'll just tell people, hey, we support distribution spec 1.1, and they know that that means you don't have these new features in your registry. And when they say we support 1.2, then users will expect, okay, great, I can now use the new artifacts over there. That just gives the users the feedback they're looking for of, does this registry support the new things I'm looking for?
Right.
But I don't know if that needs to be in like the API calls here, anything like that. I think the registry APIs should give the feedback they need just with 404s.
Yep, good point.
But if the world says use the OCI artifacts refer API, and that's what's going to get through, I will do what it takes to make this go through. So whatever makes most sense.
No. It looks from here that you guys are getting ready to have a final proposal, or at least an initial proposal to bring forward.
Yeah,
to-
and so
Okay.
this was like the little pre-thing. I didn't see anything else on the agenda, so I said, let me hit them up early, and that way, if they have things they want to make sure we include in this, we can get them before we come to the final proposal.
Okay, cool.
Cool. That's what I've got. Any other questions? I think a lot of people have been on the other calls already, and so I think the two big key players here, Mike and Phil. Anything from your sides that you want to see out of us? Otherwise, I think we're in a good spot.
Yeah, I don't have any major input. I think it looks like it's shaping up well. Yeah.
That's the vote of confidence I was looking for. Cool. Well, that is all I've got. If people want 15 minutes back, I won't hold you hostage.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. And we'll chime back in on this one when we have something ready to present.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.